Welcome to Fireside Giants. My name is Alex with my co-host here, Anthony Rivardo. Today, a couple more injuries. Some players not going to be featuring against the Carolina Panthers on Sunday, to be expected. Of course, kind of hard to talk about the Giants right now. I'm really focusing in on the Knicks and some positivity. If you're watching any other sports, drop in the comment section on YouTube below what team you're most excited to watch. Because the Giants, as a lot of people are mentioning on social media, are headed towards draft kind of evaluations and coverage right now. Unfortunately, that's kind of the direction we're headed. Maybe we can get a win against Carolina, but without Saquon Barkley, without Kenny Golladay, Kadarius Toney, questionables like Sterling Shepard, Evan Ingram, Darius Slayton, no Andrew Thomas, I can't imagine we walk away with a win. I mean, they have a solid pass rush. Son Reddick has 6.58 sacks this year. Brian Burns is having a solid season. I mean, they have some phenomenal players over there. It's going to be tough to win even if Sam Darnold is seeing ghosts. So at the end of the day, I wanted to just talk about, who's to blame right now? Is Joe Judge, should he be shouldering a lot of the blame here, or should kind of some of it be placed on Mara or Gettleman? We want to kind of discuss that a little bit. And also take a look at what Amani Toomer had to say about the language, the body language the players have been showing the past couple of days, especially against the Rams, and what he thought, what he saw that he was like, we won a Super Bowl. We know what it looks like. What he saw from the players that he didn't really like. And I think that really stands out to me as a big part as to why this Giants team is struggling. Before we dive into all this stuff, Anthony, how you doing tonight, my friend?
I'm doing all right. If you guys want me to look at any draft prospects, let me know in the comment section down below, and I'll start looking at them, and I'll do some videos on them if I really have to, because that's really how we're feeling right now. All Giants fans, we're like, season's over. Let's look towards the draft, right? And there's a lot of good draft prospects coming out, and the Giants do have 2 first-round picks. So if we're really going to start doing that, let me know in the comment section if there is any draft prospects that you want me to take an early look at, do an early video on, and really start to discuss and get the ball rolling on now sooner rather than later. But of course, when we're discussing the current state of the New York Giants, and we're discussing former players coming out and saying, oh, this team looks like it has no heart, no fight, body language is terrible, that might be indicative of the head coach. That might indicate that the head coach is a problem. And I know that's going to surprise many of you to hear me bring that up, because Joe Judge, at one point, I was the leader of the Joe Judge fan club. Now I don't really claim to be that anymore, because, man, he has not won me over the way he was supposed to. He hasn't won any of us over. In fact, he's lost many of us throughout this season. And it's a really sad time to be a Giants fan, really sad for me specifically, because Joe Judge seems to be a large part of this problem. And that's something that we're going to discuss right now. But again, when you have veteran or retired players, alumni from the Giants coming out and saying, this team looks terrible, this team looks like this, and it's all negative, that's when you know it's very serious and it's going down a very slippery slope, and it could lead to many firings and a very sad, depressing rest of the season before we get into hopefully a refreshing off season.
Yeah, I mean, look, a couple of positives that we can derive from this season would be, Kadarius Toney. Hopefully, he comes back healthy and shows some more growth there. Andrew Thomas is blossoming. Depending on what the Giants do next season, or next offseason, whether it be go out and draft Evan Neal out of Alabama, or a pass rusher in Kayvon Thibodeau. The thing that I am most questioning right now, Anthony, and one that really is going to be a big challenge for the Giants front office this offseason, is that most general managers want to hire their own head coach, right? Most general managers want to have their guys. Who is going to be on this list of general manager candidates? Because the consensus is that Dave Gettleman will be gone. But who's going to be on the short list of candidates, knowing that they're going to be going into a situation where they have to accept Daniel Jones, where they have to accept Joe Judge and his coaching staff, they have to accept the fact they don't have much money to spend? What candidate's going to want to go into that position? They want to go into it saying, I have the autonomy to spend. I have the autonomy to decide who my coaching staff is, the autonomy to decide who my personnel evaluation, scouts are or whatnot. I think that's going to be a big hindrance on who they want to bring in here as the new GM. So it kind of brings up the idea that maybe Gettleman's not going to be fired, because if they fire him, they're going to have to turn over a lot more than the GM position. And I think that's going to be a big question for John Mara. What does he do there? Is he able to be convinced that Dave Gettleman deserves another season? That the team is all healthy, they're unhealthy. Is that a reason to justify keeping them another year? That's a big problem. And I think, Anthony, that the only way I justify it is this. This is probably what will happen. They will fire Dave Gettleman. They will promote Kevin Abrams to general manager. They will keep everything the same except Abrams will be general manager. And and then if they have another bad season, then they'll fire Kevin Abrams and then they'll replace him. That's the only way I see this going, that John Mara feels comfortable going about it.
Dude, you're trying to give me nightmares? You trying to have me staying up in the middle of the night screaming and crying? No, that cannot happen. It cannot be rinse and repeat. That's what that would be, rinse and repeat. That is basically having Dave Gettleman leave to just bring in Dave Gettleman. That's exactly what you're doing there. The Giants need to do
They
something
have no
new. They need to
choice,
go
man.
down a new direction. They have
They do.
choices, man. I understand it's
I
going to
don't
be a
know if they
short
do.
list.
Like, what
Not
do you do
everybody's
though if Joe
going to want to
Judge?
not
You
everybody's
know,
going to want to come into the situation. No, of course not. But the
what if they're not a
Giants,
new quarterback?
they can't do that though. You can't go with Kevin Abrams as the GM. I mean, the
I
fan base is
agree. I
asking
agree.
for wholesale changes. If John Mara is going to promise wholesale changes, he needs to make wholesale changes. He has to find the one or two willing candidates that will come in here and keep Joe Judge as a head coach if need be, and he has to hire one of them. Not go with Kevin Abrams. Kevin Abrams is not a good decision. He has overseen many of the horrible personnel decisions that the Giants have gone through in the past few years. Not to mention, he's also known to be the cap space guy. The Giants cap space is atrocious right now. It's in horrible shape. It's been really bad for the past couple of years. I mean, we went on a huge spending spree last year, but now if you look towards the future, we have no money at all. Free agency is not even an option for us. It's building through the draft strictly. And Kevin Abrams is a man who doesn't build through the draft because he is a contracts guy. So he's a free agent builder. We don't need a free agent builder. We need a draft builder. So we need to find the guy that's got very good talent evaluation in terms of drafting players successfully and understanding positional value, and also not giving out lucrative contracts to players that aren't deserving. Kevin Abrams, the contract guy, has been giving out lucrative contracts to players that aren't deserving. So Giants cannot go ahead and make him the general manager. That wouldn't make any sense if they're promising wholesale changes, if they're promising to make a change and fix this. That's not fixing it. That's almost making it worse at this point. Giants need to do something very different. I understand there's going to be a short list. Not many no, nobody's going to want to step into the situation. Even if they fired Joe Judge, no head coach is even going to want to step into the situation. It's a bad, ugly situation for the Giants, but someone's going to be willing. They're going to have to take a chance on a progressive mind that's willing to take risks, and they're going to have to take a risk on him, and hopefully it'll pan out and the Giants can turn things around. That's really the only option for me. Kevin Abrams, not an option. If that happens, I don't even know if I can continue supporting this team.
Yeah, I mean, Kevin Abrams, it's John Mara's way out. That's really what he represents. Kevin Abrams represents the easy way out for John Mara instead of realizing that maybe this team needs to be turned over a little bit. A GM can come in here and say, I have some good pieces, right? Like I have Kadarius Toney, I have a left tackle that's proving to be a bookend when healthy. You have Xavier McKinney, who's a solid player. You have some good talent on defense. Like a GM can come in here and say, this is a team that has good players at multiple key positions, right? Like that's not something that most of us disagree on. Like we have talent. It's a matter of drafting better. Our draft picks. I've been doing a lot of research the last day and a half on our draft history, and my friend Anthony, we are so bad at drafting players, especially defensive backs. Our cornerback drafts the past 13 years, the only good cornerback that we have drafted in 13 years since Corey Webster and Aaron all those older guys is Prince Amukamara, and I would label him as average. That's the best cornerback. Now go look at the Browns. They drafted Greg Newsome out of Northwestern with their first round pick this year. And if you watched the game last night, he looked amazing. He looked like an absolute stud. You look at Horn on Carolina before he got hurt. He looked awesome. The Giants have a major problem scouting. They have a major problem evaluating talent that isn't interior defenders who they end up letting go anyway. Linval Joseph, Jonathan Hankins. They let these guys, BJ Hill, Dalvin Tomlinson. They are so good at drafting interior linemen just to not sign them on second deals. Don't understand it. I don't get it. Edge rushers. We can't draft edge rushers since JPP. We've had a lot of trouble there, and we haven't spent enough draft capital there. Like, is it Joe Judge's fault that the drafts of the past couple of years haven't been altogether that great? I mean, he has a say in it because he's the one actually going and scouting the Senior Bowl and scouting some of these situations in combine. So he definitely has a say. They have hit on a couple of guys like Tony, Andrew Thomas. They've hit on. Nick Gates is an undrafted free agent. They've hit on a couple of players, but the reality is that they've missed on way more than they've hit on. And I think that's when you have the most draft capital of any GM since Dave Gettleman's been part of this organization, that's a problem. The foundation of this team is broken. The depth, there's no depth. Aside from on the offensive line, good offensive lines can handle injuries. Look at Dallas. They didn't miss a beat when Tyrone Smith left the game a couple weeks ago. Like that's the reality of when you have good talent evaluators and you have good players and good coaching, you're able to sustain and supplement injuries. The Giants are not able to do that. They lose a guy. They lose Blake Martinez. Tay Crowder has not played well. Reggie Ragland is not a good player. I want to hear anyone say that he is. We have nobody behind Blake Martinez, and you have to anticipate having good depth in this in the NFL these days. But again, like the starters aren't playing that well either. So, it's a lot of negative factors to go around. But Joe Judge took a big portion of the responsibility this week. He said, the fish stinks from the head down. But I'll say this, I think he's taking on a lot more, I guess, pressure, a lot more responsibility and accountability than he should be, because John Mara is the head of the fish. He took on that role, he took on that name, but the reality is John Mara starts it all, right? He hired his Chris Mara to be the president of player evaluations. Like, that's nepotism at its finest. Like, he clearly is not capable of doing a good job. And I think the NFL can't come in here and enforce any changes, but John Mara needs to look himself in the face and realize that, like, he's getting letters from people saying that he's the problem. Everything that he's done is not worked. Everything that Dave Gettleman says, he does the exact opposite of. Like, we need to stop the run. We need to we need to rush the passer, and we need to protect the quarterback. And none of those things have been accomplished. He does exactly the opposite of everything he says. He goes out and he says we need to have really great man coverage corners to win in the NFL, and he goes out and gets a great zone coverage corner in James Bradbury. Not a great man coverage corner by any means, really good in zone. He doesn't draft any good cornerbacks that have a really man coverage style. I mean, Aaron Robinson kind of is that, but they wanted to use him more of in a big nickel role. So I don't really know what the Giants are doing. They don't really have an identity. They're doing the opposite things that they're saying. The things that they are coining as strengths are now weaknesses, and the things that are weak that should be like the weaker portions of the team are strengths. Like your interior defensive line, your outside linebackers, your edge rushers should be better every time. Getting after the quarterback, in my opinion, is probably more important than anything. Putting pressure on the quarterback disrupts the entire offensive flow for any given team. That's how you beat guys like Dallas who have amazing offensive lines. The fact that we had no pressures last week against the Rams from our outside linebacker core tells you everything you need to know about Dave Gettleman and his regimen so far. And maybe even the coaching staff too. Maybe they're not doing a good enough job, Anthony. So, when you're looking at this, how much of the responsibility does Joe Judge have to shoulder? How much does he really have to put on himself before you have to look upward?
Yeah, I mean, the head coach has to take accountability. And when you see a lack of effort from certain players, the head coach has to take extra accountability, right? Because if you're seeing, there's a bunch of players out there that just aren't good enough, okay, that's one thing. You can blame that on the GM. But when you see that play like the one where Cooper Kupp scored last week, where I think it was Logan Ryan, James Bradbury, and someone else just gave up on the play, just didn't even put an effort out there to go tackle him before he got to the end zone, that's a lack of effort, and that's on the head coach. That's not on the GM. Okay, that is on the head coach and the culture that he's breeding and the discipline of the players. So, yes, he needs to take plenty of responsibility for this, for where the team is at right now. I mean, he's made plenty of mistakes, bad timeouts, bad challenge flags, undisciplined football, penalties here, penalties there, costly penalties, not playing well down the stretch. Joe Judge is to blame, and, not completely, but partially. And a very large portion of the blame goes to the head coach, Joe Judge, especially, like I said, when players just aren't trying anymore. So, and also another thing, we're always saying fire Jason Garrett, fire Jason Garrett. Well, that's Joe Judge's decision to fire or hire or keep Jason Garrett around. And he has absolutely chosen to keep Jason Garrett around for this long. So that's also a Joe Judge problem. That's also something to blame him for. The fact that this offense isn't so good is not just Jason Garrett's fault. It's also Joe Judge's fault. Joe Judge is Jason Garrett's boss. He could fire Jason Garrett, but he hasn't. So all of this, yes, the blame, the large portion of the blame, John Mara. We're all aware of that. John Mara is to blame. But if you want to go ahead and try and blame the head coach, blame the GM, it's an equal share. They're all a part of this problem, and it's not going to get fixed until they either turn things around themselves or they're gone and we find someone else to replace them.
It really feels as though, when you watch better teams, and the Browns being, the game that I saw last night, I'll say this. you can tell when a team is clicking on all cylinders, right? The players don't miss tackles, they're disciplined, they're intense, they're focused. Now, Amani Toomer had something to say about that, right? He was at the game. He was at the game, against the Rams, and they were honoring them for the Super Bowl. And this is basically what he said. He said, "I dig into the body language, right?" He said, "Are they excited? Are they edged up? They didn't seem that way to me." And I think that coming from Amani Toomer, and I think a couple other guys said it too. That's a big no-no. When you have a guy who's won Super Bowls, who's been on good teams, been on winning teams, played at the highest level of any team in this league. I will say this: the way he's saying it, the fact that he's saying that he's not seeing it in the body language is a major concern to me, because Joe Judge preaches discipline, preaches that we're going to play hard for 60 minutes, and the fact that guys are being lazy. The second half of that Rams game was a disaster. Cooper Kupp walked in on that second touchdown, and I know Jerome Henderson, the DB coach, said I did not like that. Like, they didn't even try to tackle him. They're showing like they're giving up. They look like the locker room's about to be lost, and that's a big sign to me that this team is crumbling, Anthony. So when you're looking at that and you're hearing guys like Amani Toomer say those things, what do you think comes next? If they lose the locker room and these guys start handing out losses because they just don't care anymore, John Mara is going to have no choice but to make a decision, to make a big move, because when you lose the locker room, there's no coming back from that. Coaches don't come back from losing the locker room. We saw it with Pat Shermer. We saw it from Ben McAdoo. Once you lose that thing, they will turn on you. They will not come back the same. And I think that's where we face a big problem now.
Yeah, and this is kind of similar to what I said on a previous episode. This season is reminding me a lot of 2017, right? This team had a lot of high expectations going into the year and a lot of talent offensively. And then everyone gets hurt. And then every game we just keep losing and losing and losing. And in 2017, we finished with a franchise record of a franchise worst of all time, 3-13 record. And then, of course, the locker room was gone by week 14 at the minimum. It was week 14, maybe even earlier in the season. Locker room was just gone, and it was terrible. And Ben McAdoo was getting in little passive-aggressive arguments with members of the media, and he was getting in fights with players in the locker room. He lost the locker room completely after all those injuries piled up, after all those losses piled up, and that's after coming away with a playoff berth the previous season. So this season is starting to remind me of that, because we're at the point where like 5 or 6 weeks in, with so many injuries and so many losses already, if they continue to pile up and the Giants continue to go down this trajectory and finish with a top 3 pick or top 5 pick, Joe Judge might lose a locker room and it might get really ugly, and he might actually lose his job by the end of the year. And I don't want that to happen. I hope that he's able to turn things around somehow, and hopefully he can keep this team together and not lose the locker room. But just the way that it's headed, it looks eerily similar to 2017, which was honestly the worst season in New York Giants history. So hopefully it's not a repeat of that, but we're going down that path and it can get ugly. So be very cautious of that. Be very cognizant of the fact that this could get extremely ugly by year's end. And if it does, I would expect there to be firings all over the place.
Yeah, and I'll say this. I don't believe in tanking. I don't believe that teams should lay down like the Philadelphia Eagles did last year. I don't think that's the right way to go about it. I still think you have to compete and try to win. You play a professional sport. You get paid millions of dollars to win games, and I respect that. I'm not going for a draft selection here, but I will say the Giants, if they lay down, and it seems like they're going to, they're just gonna end up with a good draft pick. The coaching staff isn't going to make the decision to pull DJ for a better draft pick. I think this is where we're at, though. Like, I mean, the Eagles, they're you look at them right now, they laid down, everyone's already forgotten, it seems, and they have 3 first-round picks next year, 2 or 3 first-round picks. They have a ridiculous amount of draft capital. I don't want to make that same choice. You already have 2 first-round picks, Anthony. But at this point in the season, do you think that going offensive lineman and pass rusher is more important than going another quarterback? Do you think DJ is still the guy?
Yeah, I don't know. I think that's really a decision that we can make at the end of the year, because I want to evaluate his full season, his full body of work before we get to that point. Obviously, yeah, right now I'm leaning towards going offensive line and pass rusher. But if we get through the rest of the season and Daniel Jones only finishes with 10 touchdowns on the year and, 18 interceptions somehow, then yeah, it's probably time to move on and just restart, hit the reset button completely, go with a new quarterback, new coach, new GM, new everything. That's something that you can definitely consider doing. But I'm not going to make a decision on the quarterback until we get to the end of the year. Obviously, evaluating him is not going to be easy. Andrew Thomas on IR, every other player around him injured. But you got to try your best to evaluate these players, even in a crappy situation. Can't really make a decision right now based on Daniel Jones' play through 6 weeks. Got to wait till the end of the year, and then we can make that decision.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think we need a bigger sample size, especially if Andrew Thomas comes back and you still have 6 games remaining. Let's see how DJ performs. Like this is, I think Daniel Jones knows this is like one of his last opportunities to prove that he is the guy. You know what I mean? Like he's got, and I think that's why he's putting it all on the line. Like yes, he wants to win, but I also think he realizes his job is on the line. Like his future, his career is on the line. If he doesn't prove that he's the guy, if he doesn't prove he can help, carry this team when guys are out, like some of those better quarterbacks like Lamar or Mahomes, like whatever it might be, if he doesn't prove that, like the Giants could and a new GM could come in. And I think that's what Daniel Jones's mindset should be. Like not focusing on that, obviously, but in the back of his mind, he should know if Dave Gettleman gets fired and they bring in a new general manager, he wants to be good enough that that new GM says, I can work with this guy. I can win with him. Because that's what Daniel Jones is doing. He's auditioning for the next GM right now. He's not playing for Gettleman anymore. He's auditioning for the future. And that's like what he should have in the back of his mind, because a new GM could come in here like they did in Arizona and completely replace the quarterback and just go, screw Josh Rosen, screw Daniel Jones. Let's go with another guy. The quarterback class isn't altogether that strong this upcoming offseason, which is a big concern. There are some guys with potential, but again, like a lot of people might disagree with that. It's going to be interesting. Like Anthony said, we need more sample size. We need the rest of the season to take a look, guys. But make sure to keep tuning in to Fireside Giants. We'll have you guys covered with any news all the time, every day. We got you guys under wrap. We got you guys with the talent evaluations and the draft evaluations in the future. I know it's going to be a long season, but we are here to guide you through it. We're not going anywhere. So, enjoy the ride with us. Enjoy our rants. If you want us to talk about anything, please let us know in the YouTube comment section. More than happy to take on ideas. I think that would be pretty fun considering, it's tough to talk about this team at all at the moment. But make sure to subscribe below on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube as always, and we'll catch you guys on the next New York Giants video.